Great. Now let's come to the panel and Q&A part of the event. I see there's some questions in the Q&A already. You can use the little thumbs up icon to upvote questions. So do make sure to do that so we can get the questions everybody's interested in to answer, as well as to putting questions that you might want to ask the panelists. First up, I want to talk about this question that we also anticipated in our preparation for this event, which is privacy of the data, right? It's great we have so much data that can help us do these great things, but what about privacy? Inder, do you want to start?
Yeah, let me start by saying the following, and I'm very passionate about this subject. I'm glad it came up. You can have both. You can have both perfect personal privacy protection and access to information, in this case, around where outbreaks are occurring and how fast they're spreading. You can have both. It is not an equation. It is not a balancing act. You can have 100% of both. We have the ability to design technologies and architect them today to do that. At Kinsa, it's not possible, for that example that I showed you today, healthweather.us, it is not possible for you to identify an individual from that map of where and when illness is occurring. That shows you the percentage of people ill on a county by county basis. That is not personal data. It is not de-identified data. It is not metadata about a person. That is a population level inference. In our case, we have only shared de-identified data 4 times in our entire history. And those are with researchers to publish peer-reviewed scientific literature. And when we do that, we are adamant about the fact that we put in clauses into our contracts that say, you cannot combine this with other data sets. You cannot attempt to re-identify it. The use case is X. It is narrowly defined. Because everyone on this call and I know, if you try hard enough, you can re-identify almost any de-identified data set, if you try hard enough. So the point here is we take a very, very strong stance. Listen, we care about that as individuals because we're all at Kinsa a little bit of privacy phobes, but it's important for our business too. If we don't have the trust of our users, we have nothing. And so again, I want to hit that point. You can have both. And I'll also add an editorial comment. From what I've seen of the Apple Google contact tracing solution, they were listening because they're also really working hard to architect the solution such that you can have both. And I want to commend them for that because that's not necessarily the way that we've heard brand-wise the tech companies are approaching things in general, but they've done, as far as I can tell, they've done a good job on that front.
Thank you, Inder, for that passionate talk about the importance of having both and how it actually ties to business, your business success as well. So that's great, greatly lined up incentives. What about like if you work with the employers and give their employees thermometers? Do you have this? I imagine companies would come to you asking, "Well, can I know who's sick?"
They come to us all the time asking that question, and my usual response is, "You're asking the wrong question. The question you should be asking is, how do I contain an outbreak? How do I have an early warning system? How do I stop it from affecting the rest of my employee population?" You don't need access to all of your employees' personal data. And in our culture in the United States, people are unlikely to give that to you. So don't ask, right? If you want to ask, do it in a way that's friendly to the employee, that provides an incentive to them. So we have one employer that's saying, hey, listen, we want to create the right incentives for our employees to take time off. We don't want them coming into work. But in order to give them a free sick day, we need to confirm that they're actually ill. So we said that is a legitimate reason. We're going to put a message in our app that says, if you'd like a free sick day, you have a fever, you have symptoms, you've answered our COVID survey, now you're sick. If you'd like a free sick day, tap this button and you can send an email to your HR representative and get a free sick day. That's a legitimate reason. It's one time, it's not ongoing, it's one time as a message and you're opting in. But the system that we've set up allows us to understand aggregate population data by location, by department, without identifying the individual, so that an HR representative, and to be clear, the employees themselves can see what's going around in their location, in their department. It's an early warning system. Again, we've run it in 2,000 schools across the country. It works. We're now running it in several Fortune 500 companies. It works. And it helps you understand who's sick when they're still in the home, before they ever get on public transportation, before they ever get in the lobby, where by the time they get in the lobby and you do those high throughput fever screenings, those high throughput fever screenings are inaccurate, and B, they've already spread the disease. People are walking in with COVID into that office. They've already spread it. So the point of our system is to keep it in the home and, again, protect personal privacy. Sorry for the long-winded response.
Great, Inder. Cool. And John and Li Tao, you might want to unmute yourself, and if you want to talk also on this point of data and privacy, which I'm guessing you also have to deal with in your product, please do speak up.
Definitely. And we work with government organizations as well as with private organizations, and fully align with the privacy and data governance needs. Our philosophy is that getting hold of the data is one of the best approaches that the business should take in order to be able to comply with regulation, in order to be able to promote privacy and to promote better data security and data governance. So we are kind of part of the solution to promoting better data governance and getting hold of it. Basically, we follow any of the guidelines that any organization would have in place, and help them even enhance this if they need to.
And I'd add, on the industrial side, I don't see the pandemic materially affecting cybersecurity requirements. I think we've seen sort of the impact of the pandemic on cyber screening for us as a new vendor in some cases, or investment from the venture community in cyber remaining stable. But what I do see, I think in contrast to health data, machines or equipment are less sensitive to sharing data, and so again, I think the economics are shifting to increased automation, increased basically data access for assets. And the economics of cloud versus on-prem type deployments may change as part of the pandemic, but I don't expect there to be material changes in cyber posturing.
Great. Let's take a look at some of the other questions that people have. There's a number of questions on how to apply it to different situations, like with Kinza, what about the developing countries? Do you see similar solution taking place, or and what about the other kind of data you might want to incorporate to better formulate that whole data picture?
Let's start with the second question first. So, what you're seeing on healthweather.us is only our fever data. We've done the most science on the fever data. But the reason we chose the thermometer had nothing to do with fever data. The reason we chose the thermometer had to do with the behavior. What is the only product you turn to in the home to confirm illness? It's the thermometer. So we wanted to turn it into a communication system to talk to you. That's really what the thermometer's there. It's the onboarding process. It's the stickiness. Whenever you have a fever, you take a temperature multiple days. So through the app itself, we get lots of other data. And again, none of this is rocket science. If you want to know where and when illness is starting, you have to know where and when symptoms are starting, which is why the thermometer is useful. Within hours of fever onset, we can talk to you. If you want to know how fast it's spreading, you need to know how fast it's spreading in the home, the school, and the workplace. We get transmission data. As far as we know, we're the only people that have ever gotten real-time transmission information on illness spread. Third, if you want to know how bad it's going to get, you have to know how bad the symptoms are. And again, those are the things we answer through the app. Do we want to layer in things like heart rate and breathing rate? Yes, absolutely. But we also don't want to change people's behavior and make products more expensive. We want them to be accessible. And in any outbreak, if you don't have an underserved strategy, if you don't have access to, if you can't talk to people who are underserved, you've missed the boat. Why? Underserved communities tend to be larger families. They tend to spread disease more because of the larger the family, the more there's likely to be a virus hiding out in that family. And at the same time, they have less access to care and treatment, which means they wait longer. It's not their fault. They're underserved. They don't have access. So the whole point here is you need to be able to see what's going on in the underserved community in order to contain that outbreak. For the past 5 years, we've given away more than 200,000 thermometers to underserved communities across the country. Today, we have 5 states working with us to deploy smart thermometers at scale. More than 60% are to the underserved because they recognize that same fact. So that's the way we're starting. It's not the way we're ending. it's the way we're starting. So we've got to unpack our other data, and we've got to layer on more things. But we've got to make sure that that there's widespread access to this technology, so we can see where and when disease is spreading, not just in one community, but in every community.
Great. Next question is for John. There's questions about can you use TagUp for individual equipment, such like turbines, compressors, as well as fleets with multiple of these equipments?
Yes, absolutely. So our primary deployments are on large equipment fleets, but we, through partners, deploy on smaller install bases, including single sites. So we've worked with rotating machinery, like compressors or turbines, in addition to reciprocating and static assets.
Great. Cool. What about working with, do all three of you work with companies outside of the US? This is with our corporate members. We have about 3/4 of our members overseas. So we have a lot of global companies, and thus the questions about that. And if you have examples of successfully working with companies overseas, that would be helpful as well.
So we're launching in Australia, Europe, very soon, in Canada very soon. We hope to, and when I say very soon, I mean in the next 6 to 8 weeks. We hope to go much bigger than that. So my background, someone asked a question about developing countries. I spent the better part of 7 years of my life working across 14 developing countries. My heart is in a global solution. The very first thermometer we designed connected by the headphone jack. It was the least expensive connected product of any kind ever made. We can make it for far less than $1. It had wires, and that's it. But Apple and Google took the headphone jack away from us, so we had to go build a Bluetooth product. When we go to the developing world, we will develop a low-cost solution, and we will develop SMS applications. We can't go there yet, but that's where our heart is, and we want to go there soon. And for those companies out there that are looking for global solutions, the challenge with our solution or any solution like it is that a lot of these products are classified as medical devices, whether you're talking about test kits, et cetera. So they need to have global regulatory approvals. It's going to be hard to have a truly global solution for anything that's for COVID right now, but it's possible to have a good swath of the world. And we have a good swath of the world where we can work with you.
Great. Question for Li Tao. Do you see how the data analytics can have an impact on building resilient supply chain? I think that's very much on everybody's mind about supply chain. How can your solution help with that?
Yeah, definitely. So if you have a good view of your suppliers, your parts, your raw materials, and the up-to-date demand, we believe, yes, that's the only way to build resilience. When you have good view of how things change on a daily basis, and you're able to consume external sources of data like COVID closing, like changes in logistics and supplies and the transportations. That is the secret, basically, in how a resilient supply chain needs to be built. We've seen some organizations starting to think about it that way. Definitely governments around the world are thinking about some supplies in that way. And the more we are skewed towards building our analytics in a way that we consume both external as well as our own data sources within the organization and be able to put them together, the chances are that we are able to find alternatives, make fast decisions, which is the most challenging thing right now. We're talking with some CPG organizations and how trends in consumptions are changing on a daily basis. Where in the start of the pandemic, everything was about toilet paper, then it's about hair color, and then other things, and it's so hard to predict where consumption habits are going and how, with closures, with the changes of supplies, things are heading. It's critical to be able to visualize those things and for people that make decisions to be able to act upon them as fast as possible. Crucial for the economy of that all of us. Opening is great, but without having full view of how we handle supply chain, it's really difficult to open and prioritize things.
Yep, great. So one question I think that applies to all three of you is as it's about innovation, right? As startups, do you see increased interest from established companies turning into you for the ability to be more nimble and agile? Are these companies also interested in partnership, taking an investment stake, etc.? I find it pretty interesting that both Li Tao and Zhang, you've worked with large companies before, and now you're at a startup. So, any thoughts on like the view from two sides? That'd be very interesting. Zhang, do you want to start that? And then
look, I think canonically startups are more agile than big enterprises. I think in the pandemic days, what's changed, right? I think one is the ability to source new technologies from new companies, from startups. It's more difficult. You can't have in-person meetings for big enterprises. And I think that's where organizations like ILP help a lot to connect corporates with startup members, which is very important. For us, in addition to changes in sort of new business development, there's a renewed focus on working with existing clients and customers and partners to really identify new value creation opportunities inside of their existing operations. And so the conversations we've had with our customers post-pandemic have really been focused on how can we apply this faster? How can we get it out so that we understand the impact of the pandemic on our operation and improve our bottom line?
We see similar trends. Basically, digital transformation was a journey that most corporates and organizations have already taken. COVID-19, with the move for work from home, accelerated a lot of those processes. We've been talking with some organizations that were on the fence, so somewhere around the move to the cloud, for example, and now it's accelerated. It's not the question of when, it's already now. We have to do that. And with that, we have a lot of conversation of how they make sure that the data, once it is moving to the cloud or it's being transitioned into other properties, is well curated. They're not keeping the old silos, but basically transforming it in a way that is effective. And all those specific needs that have shifted, issues that organization may have been able to deal with, old processes cannot afford them anymore because the inefficiencies drag decision time too much that they cannot afford having it in a pandemic. So those are the conversations that we're having nowadays.
Great. Follow-up questions to that is in companies that's looking to digital transform and using your solutions, what have you seen work well in overcoming some of the inertia, right? I think Li Tao, you mentioned earlier about like 50 to 80% of data analytics projects fail. So what can the big corporations internally, whether it be organized, whether it be processed, whether it be, how are the ones that are winning and making these projects successful, like differ from the ones that failed? What can companies learn to be better at in terms of digital transformation?
I think there is a clear vision around the business outcome that they would like to improve, and there is a great kind of people coming around this in a mission. This is becoming helpful. The example of supply chain is a great one because it's so much linked to the core of so many of those businesses. So once they realize that they need fast digital transformation, the ability to de-silo the supply data is something that drives very fast also the process change and then the organizational change around it. The same around spend, the same about organizations that decide to be customer driven and drive customer 360 digitization, want to harmonize all the information and get a good view of the customers throughout the buyer journey. That's another thing. So my view is that organizations are way more successful when they do transformation for the sake of a specific business goal rather than transformation for the sake of transformation.
Well said. Zhang, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo Li Tao's point. I think that's the key, is having a clear success criteria at the outset, understanding what does it take to move the needle and what needle are we focusing on. And the only other point, I think that for our deployments, enterprise deployments have been most successful, having a very clear champion internally with our partner and or customer who can help drive it forward. Those are the two keys.
You know, Rebecca, I'd add one other thing for corporates to think carefully about when it comes to data businesses. Lital's colleague Andy and I talk about this occasionally, which is there are two types of companies in my experience out there when it comes to thinking about data as a currency or data as a real asset for the company. One is the companies who actually do think of data as a currency or data as an asset. The other is the companies who give lip service to it. And by the way, 85% of the companies in my experience give lip service to it. They talk about it as if it's a currency, but they don't act on it as if it's a currency. An example of this is one of the larger pharmacy chains in the country found that this is well before COVID, found that our data was the earliest, most actionable information to prevent stockouts. And the ROI on that was very high, but they weren't actually willing to pay for it. And the example they gave was, well, I don't have budget for that. But the ROI is enormous, right? MBA 101. You know, if the ROI is that high, do it, right? And you've already run the pilot. So these are the kinds of examples where I see people come out from large corporations and talk about the value of data. And then I actually see how their organizations act, and they do not think of data as a currency. And I want to, for those of you that are out there, I'm making that point to you, to align the actual incentives of how, you know, to align the talking points with the actions. I think people do need to look at data currency. You wouldn't leave money laying around outside of a bank. Andy Palmer from Tamer uses this analogy a lot. You wouldn't leave money just sitting out there on your desk, would you? You put it, you organize it well. The same thing is true with data. You don't want to leave it out there. You need to organize it. You need to value it as a currency. And today, people are still giving lots of lip service to that.
Wow, only 15% of the companies. Yeah, so that number can definitely grow. I hope any of you listening can take that as a call to action to think about ways to make that happen and perhaps work with some of our innovative startups here. Inder, one last question I have for you, I think we probably need to wrap up pretty soon, is I keep thinking back to the Jeannie Ross, the two sides of the digital transformation, both the operational efficiency, getting your act together, and the innovation and rapid business innovation. So, like you talk about great story with how you thought about public health first, and then came up with the thermometer as a way of really get to that early warning system. How can companies thinking about that kind of rapid business innovation look at the existing things that they're working on? You know, for example, like taking it from thermometer to early outbreak. You know, that's a big jump, right? Like, how can they start thinking about finding the innovative pieces in their organization to build on?
You know, I don't have great advice. I'm not sure that my example is a wonderful example from which to learn, because until February 1st of this year, people would still scratch their heads and be like, wait a second, it's a thermometer. How are you doing this? And we went through the whole process in the peer-reviewed literature. The one thing I would encourage companies to think about is think about their innovation structure. In my experience, there's two ways to do innovation in a larger company. One is have two different teams think about a really, really big problem, 2 or 3 different teams. I'm a big advocate of this multi-team approach, where they come together every once in a while to cross-pollinate, but they're independently thinking about, how do I solve this problem? That kind of approach, in my experience, tends to work really well. It's the structure of how you're trying to attack a problem with using innovation. The other thing is champions. You've got to find an internal champion that believes. Not that's doing this to advance their career for the next year, but they believe. The thing about entrepreneurs, a thing about all of us, is we believe. Right? We're doing this because we're going to figure out how to solve the problem, period. Irrespective of the product or the technology, we're going to figure out how to solve the problem. And I think you need that internally, that kind of determination and persistence in order to solve any really, really big problem. It's that kind of determination that's required. So structure innovation in a certain way, and then find the champion. Find the champion that believes.
Thank you, Inder. Well said. John, Lital, any last words for our audience on how they should look forward to digital transformation?
I think just thank you, Rebecca, for including us, and I'll follow up. I saw some questions I can answer in the text box, but thanks for organizing and including us.
Same here. Thank you. Really believe that data can help these days. So hopefully all of us can get better data from everywhere we're looking at. I think this is the problem these days. We cannot trust what we read, right? So we need more trust.
Great. Thank you so much to all our speakers today. Really appreciate this lively, engaging panel and with some impassioned thoughts.